Today's finally the day. All the trailblazers who saved for Kafka since day one are like, because she's finally here. Now she's an incredibly potent nihility character even without any Eidolons that can detonate all types of damage over time effects with her skill and ultimate. As always, this guide will cover her optimal relics and light cones to general playstyle and her best team composition. Without further ado, let's get this guide rolling. In a nutshell, Kafka's kit revolves entirely around her teammates' ability to apply damage over time effects. Starting with their skill, it deals big damage to the target and weaker damage to adjacent enemies. One instance of artificial dot damage is also dealt to the main target for every existing dot effect on the enemy, with each extra instance of damage dealing 75% of the damage that a normal dot would deal at talent level 10 when the enemy takes their turn. Kafka's skill is extremely strong, and because she always wants to spam it in battle, there are two things you need to internalize about this extra effect from Kafka's skill. First, multiple instances of artificial dot damage can trigger against the enemy with one use of Kafka's skill, and each instance deals damage equivalent to the element type of the dot present, such as wind damage for wind shear or fire damage for burn. That means the damage will scale proportionately with investment to your other characters that apply dots aside from Kafka. The second thing to internalize about Kafka's skill is that the artificial dot damage from Kafka's skill does not reduce the timer for dots on the enemy. In other words, she's not exactly detonating the dots, but rather replicating the dots by dealing an extra hit of damage for every dot present on the enemy, which is the best case scenario because you're still able to whittle down the enemy with every turn they take. Luckily for Kafka, the same principles that apply to her skill also apply to her ultimate as well. At talent level 10, Kafka's ultimate will deal lightning damage to all enemies on the field, apply her own lightning dot effect to the enemies, and cause all enemies to take dot damage equivalent to 100% of the damage that would be dealt if they took a turn. Again, these dots will not lose a turn off their duration and also scale with investment into other characters if Kafka hits an enemy that has dots applied by another character. It should be noted that before unlocking Kafka's first major trace at Ascension 2, her ultimate will only replicate shock damage. Once you unlock this first major trace, the doors to Kafka's team building become wide open as she gains synergy with a lot of other nihility characters like Sampo or Luca. Last but not least, Kafka's talent launches a follow-up attack whenever an ally uses their basic attack. This follow-up attack will apply shock to the enemy with equivalent damage scaling that her ultimate shock has and can only occur once per turn. Kafka's follow-up attack regenerates 10 energy, so it is a crucial part of her kit to abuse. Although not mandatory, if it is possible, players might want to make sure that at least one character on their team is faster than Kafka to use their basic attack at the start of battle and instantly proc her talent. This guarantees that Kafka can open up the battle with a follow-up attack to apply a lightning DOT to the enemy, and then immediately use her skill to activate its secondary effect and replicate that dot damage. Additionally, with proper usage of Kafka's follow-up attack every turn cycle, she is guaranteed to get her ultimate back with just 3 skills, even without an energy recharge rope. If you decide to run an energy recharge rope, it still will not give you any new energy breakpoints with just 2 skills unless you roll the RNG wheel and get extremely lucky with energy from receiving hits, so generally it's safe to run an attack percent link rope for consistent dot damage. If you're curious about her other stats, let's jump right into the relic section and tackle her stat priorities and best relic sets. Kafka's best relics and planar ornaments stay true to the sets available since patch 1.0. For relic sets, the 4-set Band of Sizzling Thunder is the only set you ever want to farm for Kafka unless Hoyoverse releases something better in the future. Because Kafka looks to spam her skill as close to 100% of the time as possible, you can get insane value out of the attack percent from the 4-set effect for not just her own lightning damage, but also any of the dot damage she deals after applying shock with her follow-up attack. Any combination of the 2-set Musketeer of Wild Wheat, 2-set Band of Sizzling Thunder, and the new 2-set Messenger Traversing Hackerspace give great stat bonuses to Kafka as temporary pieces. Eventually, you'll want to replace any 2-set combinations with the full 4-set Band of Sizzling Thunder, but these are options for any player who didn't pre-farm the Cavern with the Lightning set. Kafka's only recommended planar ornament at this time is the 2-set Space Stealing Station. Because Kafka is a dot character and dots cannot crit, you generally want to avoid any planar ornaments oriented around crit such as Inert Salsado, Rutilant Arena, or Celestial Differentiator. Many players already choose to farm Simulated Universes World 3 for how well the two planar ornaments fit on most characters in the game, and Space Sealing Station is a no-brainer for Kafka given how the attack percent increases both her skill damage and dot damage. Relic stats want attack percent in the body, speed in the boots, lightning damage in the sphere, and attack percent in the link rope. I've already discussed the difference between an energy recharge rope and an attack rope, but for the sphere slot you can always use attack percent if you have yet to farm a lightning damage spear. Substats to focus are speed, attack, effect hit rate, and break effect. Getting a few effect hit rate rolls is particularly important because Kafka can guarantee her debuffs against even the strongest enemies in the game with just 28.2% total effect hit rate, as long as you have her final major trace unlocked for the increased debuff base chances. Her minor traces already grant her 18% effect hit rate, so in order to account for the highest amount of enemy effect res in the game currently, plug these values into the debuff equation and you'll require 10.2% effect hit rate from relic substats. 10.2 effect hit rate is only 3 effect hit rate rolls, so you're not hard pressed in substats and won't have to sacrifice many rolls from attack or speed. The great thing about Nihility characters is that they have a pretty good pool of light cones to choose from. Although there is a clear split between dot light cones and general debuffing light cones, most of them don't suck and can be used on at least 1 or 2 characters minimum. In the case of Kafka's best light cones, there are several fantastic 4-star options for her. Her best light cone is technically her signature light cone, Patience is All You Need, but for a signature light cone it is a little bit underwhelming considering how good the alternatives are. With that said, Patience is All You Need is by means not a bad pickup for hardcore Kafka fans because it provides a little bit of everything with a damage percent bonus, a stacking speed buff, and also a special dot effect called the Road. The stacking speed buff can be an inconvenience when trying to speed tune your Kafka, but it is workable and many players aren't even worrying about that yet, so they can generally view these stacking speed boosts from the passive as a plus. What actually makes Patience is All You Need a mediocre light cone is the 4-star light cone Good Night and Sleep Well. This gacha 4-star light cone has a ridiculous passive that increases the wearer's damage for every debuff on the enemy, and yes, this passive also works with dots. At Super Imposition 5, this light cone is extremely competitive with an S1 Patience is All You Need with almost identical damage output. However, if you don't have an S5 copy of Good Night and Sleep Well, don't worry because it still performs fantastically compared to any other light cone. Some of the other outstanding options you can run on Kafka are In the Name of the World, Eyes of the Prey, and Fermata. Fermata is a fantastic free-to-play light cone that you can get from the Forgotten Hall exchange shop or from your weekly bosses, so definitely look to push this light cone up to Super Imposition level 5 if you have the chance, as it will outperform Eyes of the Prey without any refinements. Given that Kafka is a dot character that relies on other characters to apply dots to fully unlock her damage potential, it should be no surprise that her teams are a little strict in requirement and investment. That's not necessarily a bad thing though, because hopefully that also makes it easy for players to grasp how to build her teams. The general roles for a Kafka team aside from herself are a second dot character, a healer, and a flex unit. The second slot is always reserved for a dedicated dot unit between Sampo, Luca, and Serval usually, because Kafka's kit is so reliant on having consistent dot uptime. Sampo, in my experience, is the most consistent teammate for Kafka, but you usually pick whichever one you have built up, or if you have all of them built up, you pick based on the enemy's weakness. Luca functions well in single target scenarios, while Serval is especially good in content that is weak to lightning because she doubles down on break efficiency with Kafka. The third slot is a no-brainer because you can't deal damage if you're dead. Lota, Bailu, or Natasha are standard picks for healing, but I've even seen Japard solo sustain some teams with how massive his shield is, so as long as this character can provide enough survivability to the team, it's good in this third slot. Last but not least, we've reached the flex slot. I'm just gonna put it out right now, I think Asta is the best, or if not one of the best, teammates for Kafka in this final slot. Her ultimate grants a speed buff, and with the new Relic 4 set Messenger Traversing Hackerspace, you can push your team's speed to a ridiculous number. Now you may be asking, why is that so important on a Kafka team? Well, not only does speed allow Kafka to get more turns while the enemy is debuffed, but it also allows other units to weave in basic attacks for skill point economy rather than spam their skills or worry about getting enough energy to apply debuffs with their ultimate before their timer runs out. Additionally, Asta's basic attack also applies burn for Kafka's skill and ultimate to work off of. That means if you speed tune Asta to be faster than Kafka for the start of battle, you can basic attack to apply burn to the enemy and trigger Kafka's follow-up attack at the same time. Oh yeah, did I mention that Asta's team-wide attack buff is one of the few buffs that benefit the team's overall dot damage as well? Other Harmony units like Bronya and Yukong lose a little bit of value in Kafka teams since dot characters do not take advantage of crit buffs and Tingyun can only buff one character at a time. If all that can't convince you that Asta isn't a stellar teammate for Kafka, no pun intended, then I don't know what will. Asta haters or non-believers can use any other character that applies dots in the final slot, which don't even have to be limited to Luco, Sampo, or Serval if you don't want to. Characters like Hook and Himeko also have ways to apply burn in their kit and double down as self-sufficient damage dealers. Debuffers like Silverwolf for extra weakness break potential or Pella for AoE defense reduction and extra effect hit rate for the team are also potent options in the flex slot as well. Kafka's Eidolons are game-changing and they are so valuable that I'd even recommend pulling for them before going for her signature light cone if you don't care about flexing her signature light cone as a die-hard Kafka fan. Generally, the stopping point for Kafka is E2 for light spenders, while whales may appreciate going all the way to E6. Kafka's first Eidolon grants her follow-up attack a 100% base chance to increase the dot damage taken of the target. The only downside of this Eidolon is that it does not benefit from her final major trace's base chance increase, so the effect hit rate figure that I talked about in the relic section does increase to 66.7 total effect hit rate, with 48.7% of that coming from relic stats. Although that figure is a lot more demanding, keep in mind that you don't have to hit this number and are welcome to stay at the 28.2% total effect hit rate with 10.2% from subs. This is just a figure for players that want 100% consistency with her Eidolon 1 effect. As for her second Eidolon, as long as Kafka is on the field, she grants the entire team a 25% damage increase to dot damage, which is absolutely ridiculous, and I really shouldn't have to say anything more about this Eidolon. Moving straight into her E4, it's mostly a stepping stone to E6. Gaining 2 energy every time an enemy takes damage from Kafka's shock damage is nice when combined with her second major trace, which also generates energy, but ultimately it's not a necessity by any means since she doesn't struggle with ultimate uptime issues. Lastly, Kafka's E6 has a spicy damage increase and duration increase for any shock applied by her ultimate, technique, or follow-up attack. Getting this Eidolon is really where you start to see enemies blow up from sheer dot damage after using her ultimate and is extremely satisfying. Overall, her Eidolons are a solid 8 or 9 out of 10, and one could argue that her early Eidolons even surpass her signature light cone in the priority bracket with how impactful they can be. With that, I hope this Kafka guide was helpful to you. Definitely let me know your thoughts, builds, and teams for Kafka in the comments below. If you enjoyed this guide or thought it was useful, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. The goal is 30k before the end of the year, and with your help, we can reach that goal. Other than that, it's the same as always. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.